Hello and welcome to the podcast. Last week, what did I say? A 75.3% chance that there would be a name this week. Well, guess what? It is the 24.7%. So there's no name yet, but hopefully soon.
We're getting close.
Problem is all the good names are taken, and Pastor Don didn't like any of my other ideas, so just throw you under the bus there.
They're close. We'll get there.
Okay.
I'd say you've got an 89% chance of next week.
I don't know. I'm feeling a little discouraged. I think it's probably down to 67%.
No, we'll get there.
Okay. So, as per usual, good sermon. And would you please
thank you.
Summarize for our listeners just to jog the memory?
Yes. So Sunday we dealt with a single verse, 1 Peter 4:8. See if I can do it off my heart. Above all, above all, love one another. No. Boy, I'm not even close. Was that right?
Well, I have the NIV here. Above all, love each other deeply.
Yes.
Because love covers over a multitude of sins.
Okay, right. And I believe NRS was above all, I can't even remember now what mine was. Anyway, it was love from the heart. What I do remember is my 3 points, so we'll stop trying to memorize it. But the 3 elements of that verse that I did highlight was number 1, focusing on the first 2 words, above all, and noting that that seems to lead into the verse as being very, very important when he says, above all, love one another deeply, or maintain a fervent love, the NRS says.
Kind of like at the end of the sermon, because people have probably stopped paying attention at some point. If there's anything to remember, if you haven't been paying attention, remember this. Right. Kind of like, above all,
there you go.
Focus on this.
Exactly. And so for him to say above all, no matter what the context, and there is a specific context, we won't get into that and rehash all the previous podcasts, but when he says above all, then this is important. And so again, I talked about how Jesus does something very similar with the greatest commandment, love your neighbor. John does it frequently through the gospel and epistles. Paul does it in the famous 1 Corinthians 13 passage. So it's a very common sentiment, above all. So that was point 1. Point 2, it was about fervency, or love one another from the heart, and just how that shows that this is meant to be a priority and not just a passing, love one another, but something very deep, very significant. And thirdly was this challenging verse, which we'll talk about later, what it means to have love covering over other things, other sins. So that was the big idea. And so the challenge was, if we're called to do this above all in the days ahead, we're not likely to be able to flip a switch and suddenly it becomes fervent. Suddenly it becomes the greatest priority. But what's one thing we could do this week to notch it up a priority level? So, summary.
Very good. I almost went on a tangent, but
you almost interrupted me.
Restrained myself.
Oh, well done. Learning some respect. I like it.
Okay. So, again, your first point was about love being most important, that we, above all, love one another.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
So, you pointed back to 1 Corinthians 13, which you made the point that, you pointed to the fact that Paul makes the point that no matter what you do, you can do everything really well, really good, perfectly, in fact. But if you don't love, then you've done nothing, or you amount to nothing, right? That's how important love is. Mm-hmm. And also 1 John 4:8, which says that if we don't love, we don't know God. So clearly, love is important, and we need to hold this above all. But I want to get a little bit practical here, because in life in general, and even in the church sometimes, there are people that you don't like particularly or you don't get along well with. So how do
Who do you not like? What are you talking about? I don't know what you mean.
There's some people that might be challenging to get along with, or maybe if you didn't see this person at church, you probably wouldn't go out of your way to hang out with this person.
Okay.
And you could go into many reasons why, but this is a reality. So
I know what you're saying.
If we want to be holding love above all, how do we love people that we don't even like?
I love how you word that. I mean, I hear what you're saying. You're absolutely right. And as I said on Sunday, even when it is someone you like, you're going to have moments, you're going to have issues, you're going to disagree. The person that you love most in this life, for those of us married, there's regularly we have disagreements about things, different opinions. So
not us. We have a perfect marriage.
Oh, I see now. Okay.
Get along all the time.
Very good. It's not what I've seen, but that's fine. What were we saying? Oh yeah, when you have a more difficult time. So here's the thing. When he's talking about love, we have to try to, in some ways, separate it from this idea that we sometimes have that equates love with feelings and emotion. And obviously, when it comes to someone you love deeply, like your spouse, there's going to be lots of feelings and emotion there. However, Peter's talking about the community. He's talking about many people. He's talking about not so much feelings, but commitment. And he's talking about the commitment that we make to one another. And so one of the ways to think about it is you could almost, in some respects, I don't want to say have different classifications or just of people, but you think, okay, what does it look like for me to love someone I'm very close with? What will this practically look like? So you think of my spouse and what it might look like at home. Like, there's certain practical implications. Well, what about, my family that I no longer live with? Oh, it's going to look a little different. But if I'm committed to them, if nurturing an earnestness in my care, it might look like this. Oh, what about someone that I serve alongside? Oh, it's going to look a little different again, like this. What about with someone that I don't really like to spend a lot of time with? Okay, well, there again, that's going to look a little different. So in that instance, love is not going to be trying to be something you're not, or to necessarily try to generate something that's just not there, like being best friends. But it's like, okay, so what does love look like in this situation? Well, maybe love is just really praying and showing a lot of patience. Maybe love is not being dismissive. Maybe love is not ignoring. Maybe, it's more along those lines. So it's like I tried to say there, it's almost a scaling. It's going to look different in various contexts. So it's about choosing commitment and then seeing what that will look like in the different situations.
Mm-hmm. One thing that always sticks out to me is from a VeggieTales movie that I watched as a kid. It was called Duke and the Great Pie War. It was actually the first VeggieTales DVD that I personally owned. And the phrase that they repeated over and over again was, "True love puts others first." And it's a silly movie, and I mean, I'm a huge VeggieTales fan, but that's always kind of stuck to me. True love puts others first, right? Mm-hmm. You don't have to like someone to put them first, right? And like, this is something that Jesus constantly talks about, serving one another, and you think about actually the scripture reading was the story of the Good Samaritan.
Yes.
Right? And he showed love to his neighbor by putting them first, by inconveniencing himself to somebody he didn't even know. And again, it was a Samaritan, so there's already that tension between the Samaritans and the Jews. So theoretically, this guy probably doesn't like this other guy. Who knows? But he put him first and went out of his way to serve and care for this person. And I mean, we're supposed to have that sort of love in general, but it seems that there's an extra level of this deep love that's meant for the body of believers.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And actually, the Good Samaritan's a great example because there you have a situation. Again, it's a story, it's a teaching, but in that story, the Good Samaritan, he doesn't stick around and say, "Oh, now I've got to, be this guy's best friend for life." It doesn't seem like they even met, but he did what he could. And so, again, that's what we're called to do. What choice can we make for the betterment of others to show God's love? And again, it's not going to necessarily be, "Oh, we're best friends now," but it's what can we do? So, yeah.
Okay. Your second point was about loving one another fervently.
Right.
Use this word fervently because it's a more direct translation of the word, shall we say. So I did a little bit of digging, and I looked up this word in the Greek, and from what I found, it seems that this word basically means, taken to the literal extreme, is something being completely stretched out. So it's two words meaning to stretch out, and I shouldn't have gone down too technical because I forget what the other word means. It's the Greek word actually where we get the word tension, apparently. So to completely stretch out, so fervently, it evokes this image of a rope being pulled, completely stretched out until there's the tension, it's taut. So if you were to literally make a word picture out of this word, that's what you'd get. So this seems to fit pretty well when you think of the two examples you brought up in Acts 12, where they're praying fervently, they're stretching themselves out because they're praying so intensely, and especially that passage about Jesus praying fervently in the garden, because if he's sweating drops of blood, that seems like really being stretched out. Now, if you use that image and think about loving one another, stretching yourself out for one another. That kind of sounds scary, not going to lie. And coupling this with the fact that you mentioned this isn't a once in a while thing, but we're supposed to maintain this fervent love, can almost seem overwhelming. So, I mean, first of all, if I'm taking this word picture too far, let me know.
You are.
But also...
Oh, there's more? Okay.
It does help us kind of get in the ballpark of this idea of how intense this love is meant to be. So how do you balance that idea? And again, if I'm totally off the rails, just rebuke me. And with also the fact that the gospel offers us rest.
Right.
So stretching yourself, loving one another versus this rest. How do you balance that?
Right. Yeah, great. This is exactly the kind of thing, we love this podcast, is to probe a little deeper in things like this. So you're right. You're mostly right. So the Greek word there, you're actually technically defining the verb, which is made up of two words, stretch and out. Those are your two words. And so that's the verb. And in Peter, we're dealing with the same root word, but it's an adjective, but still has the same two basic components. And again, like you said, with the stretching out, a contemporary example that we might use is if I was trying to think of something. The best I could come up with is like an athlete, and it might be said of them that they not laid it all out, but I had one in my head there.
gave 110%.
Gave 110. They poured everything out. Like there are some expressions to communicate that idea of they are spent. Well, yeah, or 110%, like trying to say they went over and beyond what they could, which technically is impossible to go beyond what you can, but that's the imagery we use. Or even in baseball, they could say, to use the same word, they stretched that out to a double. And when we say that in baseball, it's like, it really looked more like a single that hit. But because he ran so hard, because his route was so perfect, he was able to stretch it out and get 2 bases instead of 1. And so, yeah, that's the imagery here. But where we have to be careful is it's one of those idiomatic expressions that had come to mean, something else. And so it wasn't literally this idea of stretching anymore, but just something to use to speak of an intensity. But yeah, that's the root of it, where it came from. And so, as you said, those 2 examples in the New Testament, Jesus praying and the early church praying, again, these were intense moments. So your question was, is that overwhelming? Well, that can be, but one other correction with the translation so I was using the NRS, which does say maintain this kind of love. And so that word maintain in the sentence, that's our actual action word, our verb, not the stretching. And so the actual word there is not maintain, but it's just the simple verb of to have. And so it says, church, you are meant to have this kind of a love. And the reason I think they use maintain is because, again, it is speaking of a permanence and of something that's meant to simply exist as your norm. And so maintain brings that out a little more clearly, but really, Peter just says, you are to have an intense love for one another. And so he's not trying, I don't think, to overstate it as something, super intense or overwhelming. He's just saying, yeah, this is the kind of love that we are meant to, I use the example in the sermon about redlining, but I guess baseline. I guess that's the word I'm looking for. This is meant to be your baseline. You say, well, it still sounds intense. Like you still use an intense word there. And the first thing that comes to mind is the tension, same kind of idea that we balance. Our reading in our New Testament readings this week was in Matthew 11, that incredible statement where he says, yeah, you want to follow after me? Come to me, all you who are weary, and I will give you rest. My yoke is easy, my burden light. And that just has this, as you said, the rest that we can have in the gospel. But on the other hand, we've been talking in previous weeks about the intensity of the journey, of how following Jesus can be difficult and does bring a level of suffering. So which is it? Well, it's both. It's like, I suppose, again, an illustration of imagine a life. I mean, what's one of the most intense jobs in our day and age? Like, what's something really intense?
I think a pastoral ministry intern is pretty. I'm just
very good. That was quick.
An intense job. I think of like, I don't know, working on an oil rig.
An oil rig.
I don't know.
Okay.
Seems intense. Like the
manual
labor.
Okay. Or how about being an ER doctor? Like always in the ER. Or, we know a couple of people in our church battling cancer, being a cancer doctor. Like, so there's, or a children cancer doctor. Oh, that'd be brutal. So imagine these really intense jobs. And it's your career. It's such a massive part of your life. And so all of those, and there's many jobs that are intense. Each of those individuals that embarks on those careers, if they're going to survive and spend their whole adult lives doing it, they have to figure out, how do I manage this? How do I survive and hopefully thrive and do a job well, but also live well? I think it's similar in that Jesus says, following the Lord is a huge step of faith, but it's like going through these different intensities, or imagine going through some crazy firestorm or something, but being protected. And Jesus saying, I can bring you through this. So what was our original verse? I've gotten off track now. Love one another deeply, fervently. There you go. So loving one another with this kind of love is not easy. Showing grace to someone that you'd rather not is not easy. And doing that all the time can be a real challenge, obviously. But the rest that we can have in Christ is he gives us the ability to love in that way, because he pours an even greater love within us, so that we have that to draw from in addition to his strength, which we'll get to next sermon as well. And so he gives us that to be able to navigate through.
Yeah, just like it says in 1 John something verse something.
I like that one.
We love because he first loved us.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, beautiful. Third point. Your third point was about love covering sin. And you talked about how in 1 Peter, this is the idea as we love one another, it compensates for our shortcomings, right? And so it seemed like a more general usage when Peter talks about love covering over sin. He doesn't get very specific. It just in general. Now, you also mentioned that this phrase is also used in James 5, verse 20. Now, when James uses this word, he is much more specific about what he means by love covering over sin. So, what is the context in which James is using the phrase love covers a multitude of sin? And then, is it relevant to helping us understand how Peter uses it? Are these related? Do they help each other?
Right.
So anyways, first of all, what's the context in James for the use of this word?
Well, actually, before I answer that, because I love to go off track, it does remind me again of a conversation we had a few weeks ago about the reading the scripture and how the scripture is meant to be understood for us. What was that fancy term you taught us?
Perspicuity.
Perspicuity of the text. So here's an example. So that statement, love covers over a multitude of sins, seems pretty straightforward. Like it's, there's no big words in there like perspicuity or whatever you said. It seems a simple concept. And if we take it out of context, we could say, it means this. But we had to carefully take a step back and say, well, it doesn't necessarily mean what you think it might mean, which is that if you love someone, it will get you forgiveness. Love covers a multitude of sins. So that's when it requires, as we talked about, you always think of, did we say this a few weeks ago? The concentric circles, you drop the pebble in the water and you've got the circles. Is that right? Concentric?
Sounds good to me.
Okay. So you think about scripture like that. You say, okay, there's that 5 words, covers a multitude of sins. And you start going wider and wider to try to understand it. And so as I said, in Peter, he makes very clear that forgiveness comes only through Christ. So then we say, okay, well, if it only comes through Christ, then something else must be happening here. And so then you go wider again to try to... So anyway, that's how we landed where we did. That's something of an aside, but remember those circles. So, James, you said what is James?
How does James use this
Right.
phrase?
Right. So I realized actually I was somewhat incorrect on Sunday. So he does not produce the exact phrase. I thought he said love. He doesn't say love, but he speaks of covering over a multitude of sins. So other than love, he has the exact expression, at least in my translation. So there in James, it's the very, very end of the letter. It's the closing words, in fact, which also we need to be aware of because it's not in the middle of a heart of an argument. It's almost these passing words, first of all. But what he says, I believe, if you can correct me if I'm wrong, is he at the end says, "Oh, by the way, if there is a brother that has strayed or wandered from the truth, and you go and bring him back," it says you're saving his soul from death and covering over a multitude of sins. So a very different context, as you noted, because it's not just this generic love one another. It's this very specific situation of someone that has wandered. And then someone else goes after them, like the lost sheep and the shepherd going after the one sheep, and helps them to come back. And it says, again, there's, when you bring someone to the truth, there is that salvation, that saving one from death. And again, so then here pops up at the very end, the final words of James, this covering. So how does it differ from Peter? Well, we talked about Peter in the context of in the life of a community, when you choose to love one another, like that person we mentioned earlier, who maybe is not easy for you to get along with, when you choose grace, you're going to compensate for that feeling within you that just wants to, boot them out the door or something. That's what you told me you wanted to do to, who was it again? No, I'm just kidding. So James is not that context. But what James is getting at is the bigger picture of, yes, when people stray, and there is love here, isn't there? If you love your family enough to not just, sometimes when people make choices, we can have the attitude of, let them, if they're going to be like that, if they're going to turn their backs on us, and we can be upset about it. But this act of love of saying, no, I'm going to continue to care for them. I'm going to try to be there for them. And I desire for them to come back to the truth. The same challenge in James is there in Peter. It's who exactly is the forgiveness referring to? Because it's not explicit. Is it saying if you bring someone back, it covers over a multitude of sins for you because of the heavenly treasure of what you've just done? Or is it for that person that you've brought back? The love covers a multitude of sins on their part for having left. Again, it doesn't say explicitly, but presumably it is, again, referring, if nothing else, to that relationship between you. So in a sense, both of you. So if there has been, like in the instance of the prodigal son, the son was that lost sheep that was gone. And the father says, or doesn't it say something like he thought he'd lost the son? He was like gone, but now he's come back as if to life. Something like that, right?
Yeah, my son was dead, and behold, he is alive.
Yeah, I knew it said something like that. And so here he's brought back. He's brought back into the fold. But the reality is that son committed some egregious sins. The father chooses love over holding him to account for those sins. Now, were there consequences? Again, it's a teaching, a parable-like, but there would have been consequences, presumably. And so it is with us. But when you choose love, even in that scenario, so they're very similar. When it covers over a multitude, like love, or it says elsewhere, love conquers all. Like we can overcome so much bitterness, so much pain, so much history, so many personality deaths. So much can be overcome when we choose love. Again, not just a meek, not just a watered down, but we're talking the God-given grace and mercy, compassion, the kind of love we can only draw from Christ. That's when things can be compensated over powerfully. So I'm rambling, I'm preaching again, but I think that's what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to restrain myself because we're out of time.
You're getting good at that.
But I will just close off with one final verse. It's from Proverbs. And some people connect this to the passage we were just talking about.
Yes.
Proverbs 10 verse 12.
20. Oh, I was going to say 22.
Hatred stirs up Oh, my word. Hatred stirs up conflict, but love covers over all wrongs.
Yep.
So let us be a church that loves, I would say.
I like it.
That's all we have. Thanks so much for watching. And see you next week.
Thanks, Aidan.
God bless.